Hello everyone and welcome back to Whiskey Wednesday. This week we're on another miniature kick. Thanks again to Mark Little. We did a Macallan Glenlivet 18 video way back, I think 3 videos back now. Really fun. Mark has sent me the most ridiculous package of whiskey miniatures and we will be getting through all of them, but there is a lot of them. But today we're doing 2 things which are particularly fun, as you've seen from the title. Here we have a 1970s bottling of Johnnie Walker Red Label, and we have a miniature of the original Clynelish 14 Flora and Fauna, which I've never actually seen a bottle of in the flesh before, big one or small one. A little bit of information on each bottle before we review. So the Johnnie Walker first. This is a 1970s bottle of Red Label. There is a shop which has it for sale in America. Or actually it's classed as an American whiskey, but I don't know why, for about £150. Mark bought this on auction in October 2023 for 40 quid for this miniature. Whiskey Fun have given it a rating of 78, and there is no code or link for it via Whiskey Base, unfortunately. And then as I roll through this for the Clynelish 14, feel free to go back to this point in the video too, because I am very bad at editing. Clynelish 14 Flora and Fauna, 43% ABV. Whiskey Exchange has a full-size bottle of this available for £399. Mark paid £96 for this in November 2023. And Whiskey Fun give it a rating of 90. And there is a Whiskey Base code and link. All of this information will be in the box below, but the Whiskey Base code is WB50601, if any of you are interested. Now, I really liked one of these whiskies and really disliked the other. I have bought 2 brand new Copita glasses, because if I'm going to do lots of comparisons, I need the same glass, and all of my Copitas keep breaking. We're going to do the Johnnie Walker first, because we all like Clynelish, but not all of us like Johnnie Walker. I have spent numerous, not hours, but minutes on auction websites on the closing day trying to buy 70cl bottles, what I assume are 70cl bottles of Johnnie Walker Red Label and Black Label from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, because I like Johnnie Walker Black a lot, actually. I prefer it over most of the Johnnie Walker range. Green Label's good too. Black and green, like the only ones you should really go for. Side note, finished a bottle of Blue Label the other day, which I'd had for like 6 years, and it was just sat on a shelf, and I finished the last quarter of it, not something to brag about, whilst watching The Meg 2, and I was more disappointed in the whiskey than I was in the film, and that is not a good film. Entertaining, but not good. And I was just left really bitter at the end of it because I just didn't like this whiskey. And I used to be a little bit of a sounding board for Blue Label, because I'll still say that I think everyone should try it, whether you're in a bar or whether you can buy a miniature of it from somewhere. But my bottle was from 2018, and I got it for like well below retail price, like below 100 quid I got it for from a friend. And it just wasn't fun at all. It's a great bottle to break out when you've got friends around, especially if you want to try and get people into whiskey, but it's a very expensive way to get people into whiskey, and there are so many more affordable alternatives. Side note over, 1970s Johnnie Walker Red Label. Now, if the blog posts are live, they will also be posted below, but I've reviewed these in the past purely for Mark's website, and this one wasn't particularly favourable, which I was really happy that I didn't spend a lot of money on an auction to get one. So let's smell and then taste. Yeah, so since the last time I tried it, it hasn't changed that much at all. It is so light. If we forget about the amount of distilleries that Diageo and United Distillers and DCL and everything else they've been known as over the years have owned, the lead notes on this are Cardew and Royal Lochnagar. Really floral, kind of hot cross bun, slightly raisiny. Apologies if you can hear snoring in the background, the dog has decided to fall asleep. loads of raw Lochnagar. Like, it is such... I say raw Lochnagar, I don't know for sure, but that whiskey for me has always just smelled like hot cross buns, and this does just smell like that. But outside of that, there's not a lot really going on. It's light, it's a bit fruity, it's a little bit indulgent with that kind of sweet bakery tone. There is a little bit of grain playing in the background, which does come across as a little bit nail varnish removery. Let's see if I can focus this in the camera for you, because despite that, it does have a particularly good body. Like, it is holding the glass very well. Like, really well, actually. Trying to see... I don't think this actually lists an ABV. 70 proof. And this is 3 1/3 fluid ounces. So based off old Imperial, 70 proof I think would still be 40% alcohol in the old system. In fact, exactly 40. I think I may be wrong about that, because whiskey at some point could be below 40%. Yeah, it's just a bit dull on the nose, if I'm being honest with you. It's meh, but let's taste it. It has really good body to it. It is quite oily, it is quite nice to physically taste. But the nose does just replicate, sorry, the palate does just replicate the nose. There aren't that many things going on. I can't tell if there's a note in the background which is just, if it's just bitter oak or if it's slightly peaty. It could be both, in all honesty. I'm going to roll with slightly peaty, because there is something quite reminiscent of Clynelish about it. It starts off quite bitter, but it is a very old bottling. But then it becomes a little bit creamy and a little bit kind of sweet peat. But in all honesty, it could just be the way it's been stored. Obviously, Mark paid for this on auction, but we've no idea how it was stored for most of his life. Quite a pretty bottle, though. Nice little thing to look at. 3 1/3 fluid ounces. Very, very unusual. And then on the top, for all of you still remember, see if we can focus that in. It does still say Kilmarnock on it. It's having a little bit of trouble there. But yeah, so this would have been bottled in Kilmarnock before Diageo closed the bottling plant down. That was such an obvious thing to say, because obviously I think the closing down happened in the 90s or the 2000s. But yeah, it's a cool old bottle, but much like things from Pittybake and, in my opinion, things from Rosebank, I just don't find it that impressive at all. I think it's perfectly fine. It would probably taste better than a modern day bottle of Red Label, but it's not something I'm going to pay particular attention to. I can't remember what I scored that on Mark's blog, but if you were to give me that now, I'd give it like a 6. It's not that interesting at all, really. So, let's move that to the side. A bit of a glass of water somewhere, but it appears we've gone missing. And enter Clynelish 14 Flora and Fauna. Now, points to any of you who know when Clynelish 14 actually became a staple whiskey in Diageo's portfolio. But in this range too, really fun whiskies in the Flora and Fauna range. Clynelish used to be in this range. Aberfeldy was in there when Diageo briefly owned Aberfeldy for a while. Rosebank, Pittybake. Dal Ewan was always a favourite. Mortlach 16 is a favourite for a lot of people. You can still get the Teenanick, the Mannockmore, Strathmill, Blair Athol, Benrunnist, Orthrusk, maybe a Glen Spey and a Glen Lossy. So there's not much of them kicking around anymore. But this technically was the first official bottle of Flora and Fauna. I think Diageo didn't become a company until 1997, so this would have still been under United Distillers, I think. But technically, in the modern world, this is like one of the first ever miniatures of regular Clynelish at 43%. Let's give it a little bit of time in the glass just to see if we can get a little bit of body shot to show you guys. We all love Clynelish. I'm a big fan of Brora as well. I think Brora is the only closed distillery, well, it's not closed anymore, that was worth the hype. If I had the money, I would just buy and drink Brora for the rest of my life, because there was a point on auction sites a couple of years ago where all Brora was going for below £1,000 a bottle. That's still very expensive, don't get me wrong, but I would have bought it all. Like, if I was a millionaire, I'd just drink Brora because it's incredible. Clynelish is also incredible. Whoa, that's got different. But I think Clynelish these days, personal opinion, some of you may replicate, these days it's just a Diageo special release number, and it tends to be a 10 or a 12-year-old. Last year it was a 12, this year it was, 2022 it was a 12, last year it was a 10, whatever they do with it this year. They are always cash strength, and it's always bourbon with sherry and all that kind of stuff, which is always fun, but it's so expensive now. Even independent Clynelish bottling costs an absolute fortune, and it tastes good, but you can just get whiskey that's as good for less money. But I feel like every whiskey channel says that now, because it is true. You know, how the mighty fall, but luckily this is a much older bottling. So let's smell and taste. Did a review of this for Mark's blog about 2.5 to 3 months ago, and when I first tried it, it was very much a classic Clynelish, waxy, lemony, all that kind of stuff. It is not that anymore. Well, I mean, technically the word I'm about to say would indicate waxiness, but it's more like beeswax now. And leather. It smells so much older than it is, and deeper than the colour would suggest. We've got beeswax, we've got honey. The lemon thing is still there, but when you smell into this thing, like old books and old leather, deeper, darker, much richer than its colour would suggest. There is this like vegetalness to it as well, but I mean that in the sense of when you cut open like a bell pepper and you get that kind of spritz of bell pepper water. It has that to it, like it's earthy, but it's quite refreshing. Bit different. Oh, this thing takes you on all kinds of fun, wild rides. So, the initial taste is, I don't know if you have them anywhere else in the world apart from the UK. We have a dessert in the UK called an iced finger. And what it essentially is it's a hot dog bun that hasn't been cut down the middle with just white royal icing on the top of it. And obviously the bun just tastes of nothing. It's like the most dull bread in the world. But the royal icing is where the fun is. So this has that kind of, that yeastiness of the bread. But then you get a big sweet royal icing kick to it. What I've found mentally with this whiskey is that it starts off quite sweet. So it's very much up here. And then it begins to turn down. You almost get to this point of it becoming too vegetal. And then it rides back up. It really leads through with, I suppose you could call it classic Northeast Highland whiskey notes. Not peaty, not smoky, but much like Bow Blair, much like Old Pulteney, which can start off quite sweet as whiskies, but they dive deeper into a more herbaceous thyme, oregano, basil sort of notes. This thing has a particularly powerful basil note, which when contrasted with the smell of lemon and honey on the nose is particularly interesting and very wonderful. Going back to smelling it now, it still has that beeswax leather thing to it. Again, same thing. Starts off up here, begins to drop, goes from real sweet, trebly high notes, begins to get bassier and deeper. This reflux of flavour comes across in, again, things that you would call, what would you call things like honey? Like they're sweet, but they're earthy. There's black licorice, there's like loads of vanilla, there's bits of ginger. Really unusual, such a bespoke kind of whiskey. Old Clynelish, old in the sense of old bottling. But yeah, this has the, I'll see if I can get a close up of the kind of Sutherland cat that's on the front of it, which is now so infamous in all the right ways for bottles of Clynelish. This is so much more interesting than the Johnnie Walker. I would give that like a solid 8.5. I'll go 8.5 because there's still quite a lot of flavour going on. There's a fair bit left in this glass, which I will enjoy as the night goes on. Yeah, 8.5 for the Clynelish 14. The 1970's Johnnie Walker Red Label would only get a 6. It has one flavour, sweet and easy, with a fairly nice texture to it for, you know, Johnnie Walker Red Label. But yeah, just not something I would be particularly interested in owning that. But yes, thank you all for watching this video. We will be back again with some more miniature stuff because we have loads of them, and I mean so many of them, and they are all pretty interesting. We'll probably do them in sets of 3 or 4 going forward, so I'm going to need to buy more glasses and keep these reviews a bit more succinct. That's really difficult to say, succinct. But yes, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next week. Cheers.